The sound that woke me wasn't her key in the door. It was the crash, something hitting the floor. Probably her heels. Then the laugh. That high, careless, glassy laugh I hadn't heard in years. It echoed down the hall like it didn't belong in our house anymore. I didn't move. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, watching the red glow of the digital clock. 3:03 a.m. She hadn't texted, hadn't called. The last thing I heard from her was 6 hours ago, standing in the kitchen in that too expensive perfume she wears only when she's not with me. If you're going out with friends, she said, staring at her phone more than me. Forget about me. I didn't say anything then. Just watched her walk out like she hadn't lived here for 7 years. Like the couch we bought together didn't squeak when she sat on it every evening. Like Miso, our cat, didn't curl up on her neck every morning like clockwork. I waited. 1 hour. Then 2. I paced. I checked the street. Her location was off. Her last seen on WhatsApp. 6:12 p.m. I thought maybe her battery died. Maybe she needed space. Maybe I was overthinking. But then, 3:03 a.m. The door. The heels. The laugh. And a voice. A man's voice. Not loud. Just comfortable. Too comfortable. Like he'd been here before. I sat up. My mouth was dry. I walked to the hallway, barefoot. Slowly. I didn't even make it halfway before I heard it. Her whisper. Shoo. He's probably asleep. I turned around. Back to the bedroom. Closed the door behind me. My hands were shaking, but I picked up my phone. Opened our last chat. Her last message was from 3 days ago. Don't forget the almond milk. No explanation. No apology. Nothing. So I typed. Who are you? That's all I sent. She didn't respond. She still hasn't. But tomorrow, I'm going to make her. And I don't think either of us is ready for what I'm going to find. I didn't sleep. Not a second. I lay there in the dark, eyes burning, phone in hand, that single message staring back at me like it was glowing. Who are you? No read receipt. No reply. Just me and that silence, stretching wider by the minute. At one point, I thought I heard him leave. The front door creaked sometime around 3:50. I didn't check. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was being compressed by something invisible and cold. I kept imagining him walking out casually, maybe with his shirt half-buttoned, maybe with that smug grin some guys wear like cologne. And her, probably leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, still tasting the lie on her lips. At 5:12, I heard the shower. Not ours. Hers. She had started using the guest bathroom this past month. Said she liked the pressure better. I didn't question it. I used to question everything, but lately it felt like questioning only confirmed what I didn't want to know. I got up. Not because I had a plan, but because I couldn't stay lying down anymore. My body was buzzing, like I was plugged into a current. I walked past the guest bathroom. Steam poured from underneath the door. I paused. Listened. She was humming. God, she was humming. I went to the kitchen. Made coffee I wouldn't drink. Just for the noise. The grounding. The normality. 10 minutes later, she walked in. Hair wet. Wearing my hoodie. Not the one I usually wear, but the one I stopped wearing after she said it made me look too soft. She didn't flinch. Didn't even look surprised. You're up early, she said, like nothing happened. Like there wasn't a ghost of another man still floating around her skin. Want me to make eggs? I stared at her. She leaned against the counter and reached for her phone. I asked, did you see my message? She blinked once, then smiled. That dramatic one? Who are you? Seriously, Elliot? Her tone was light. Like I was being childish. Like I was overreacting. Where were you? I asked. I told you. Out with friends. Lauren had a mini birthday thing. We ended up at Ian's place. Don't twist it. I didn't know who Ian was. She knew that. And she didn't care. You said forget about me when you left. She shrugged. Figure of speech. You take things too literally. I laughed. Not a normal laugh. A dry, cracked sound that barely made it out of my throat. Did he sleep here? I asked. That got her. For a split second, her mouth parted, her jaw tightened. And then, just as fast, she smiled again. Don't do this, Elle. Not before 7 a.m. I looked her dead in the eye and said, then tell me who you are. Because I don't recognize you anymore. She turned away. Didn't answer. Just sipped my coffee, the one she never drinks, and left the cup in the sink without rinsing it. That's when I knew. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't insecure. Something was happening. And for the first time, I wasn't going to apologize for noticing. Later that morning, She left for work like nothing had happened. She even kissed me on the cheek. That same cheek she used to trace with her fingers back when she actually looked at me during conversations. Now it was just routine, like clocking in or brushing teeth, efficient, empty. I stood in the hallway long after the door clicked shut, and it hit me how eerily normal betrayal can look in the daylight. It doesn't wear lipstick or scream through walls. Sometimes, it wears your hoodie and says, "Want eggs?" at 5 a.m. I had no plan. I wasn't one of those guys who snoops through phones or sets up secret cameras. But something was different now. Something sharp had pierced through my fog of denial. My hands were still trembling when I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the guest bathroom door again. She left it slightly open, and I could see her towel hanging on the back hook. The same towel I thought she'd lost at the gym. The one I'd looked for. She never lost it. She just stopped using it in our shared space. That's when I noticed her bag, the one she always carried when she went out late. It was sitting by the couch, unzipped, like she'd thrown it there in a hurry. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't want to go through it. I really didn't. But curiosity isn't always a choice. Sometimes it crawls up your spine and taps your brain until you obey. I knelt beside it, slowly, like it might explode. Inside, the usual: lip gloss, charger, mints. Nothing scandalous. I felt foolish already. But then I realized something. Her phone wasn't in the bag. I froze. She never leaves without it. She takes it to the bathroom, to the balcony. She once brought it into the shower, wrapped in a plastic baggie, just to keep watching some dumb cooking show while shaving her legs. It wasn't in the bag. It wasn't on the counter. It wasn't on her nightstand. I checked every usual place. I even opened drawers I hadn't touched in months. It was gone. I didn't want to spiral, but my head started spinning. What if she left it somewhere last night? What if he had it? Or worse, what if she left it on purpose so I wouldn't see something? A few minutes later, I heard a buzzing sound. A faint hum. It was coming from the laundry basket. I walked over, pulled the clothes aside, and there it was, her phone, tucked under a pile of shirts, vibrating softly against the fabric. I held it in my hands. For a second, I felt like it was burning my skin. It wasn't locked. She never used a passcode with me. But my hands were shaking, and I just stood there like an idiot, staring at the screen as if it could read my mind. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who digs through texts looking for proof he already knows exists. But I also didn't want to be the guy who keeps swallowing lies just to keep peace in a war he's already lost. I took a breath, opened her messages, and the first thing I saw wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a thread with a guy. It was a group chat, titled, Cloud 9 Cloud Kiss Mark. The most recent message was from Lauren, her best friend. The one I thought I trusted. "Girl, you're a savage." Face with tears of joy. Did he really not hear anything? I wish I could say I dropped the phone in shock or that I deleted the thread to spare myself the damage. But no. I read every word, slowly. I read it like it was a contract I'd accidentally signed in my sleep, and now I was trying to figure out what I had given up. There were dozens of messages. Photos. Inside jokes that clearly weren't meant for my eyes. Memes making fun of guys who don't get it. And tucked between all the shallow nonsense were gut punches. Pieces of my life casually dissected by women who once smiled at me at brunch. He's like a roommate who folds your laundry but still asks for hugs. He waited up again? Oh, adorable. He's emotionally cling-wrapped. Did he send another one of his midnight essays? You should leave him a note. Be right back. Never. And then June. I'm slowly phasing him out. Like, emotionally ghosting in real life. It's kind of working? I read that line 3 times. Emotionally ghosting in real life. I didn't even know that was a thing. But apparently, I'd been living it. She had been rehearsing my erasure while I was figuring out new ways to make her favorite pasta without onions. She had been beta testing my emotional breakdown like it was a group project. I scrolled further, and suddenly the tone shifted. A name appeared I didn't recognize, Zane. June had texted him privately. I hesitated. This wasn't a group chat anymore. This was just them. June. He's sleeping in the other room again. I think he knows but doesn't want to admit it. Zane, you want me to come over? June, not tonight. He was acting weird. I think he's watching. Zane, he's harmless. Soft boys always fold. Soft boys. That phrase. That 2-word insult was louder than the rest. I must have read it 10 times before my hands started to cramp. I had been reduced to a category. A genre. Something you scroll past because it's predictable. I didn't even know who Zane was. But I hated him already, not because he had her, but because she gave him me as a joke. And the worst part? It wasn't even an affair built on passion. It was boredom, entertainment. I had become the man you cheat on when you're tired of feeling unchallenged. A placeholder for attention she no longer found useful. The room started spinning. I sat on the floor, still holding her phone, still trying to decide what to do with the pieces of what used to be my life. I heard the keys in the door. She was back. Her shift should have ended an hour ago. I panicked. I tossed the phone back under the clothes in the laundry basket and stood up like I hadn't just been gut-punched by an entire digital confession. The door opened. She walked in with a smoothie in hand. "Hey," she said casually. "You look like hell." I looked at her, really looked, and realized this wasn't my wife. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. But I wasn't going to confront her yet. Because now, I needed to see how far she'd take the lie. I was done being confused. I wanted her to show me just how much of a stranger she was willing to become. She moved through the apartment like she always did, barefoot, tired, humming some tune she didn't even realize she was humming. It was just another Thursday to her. Another morning where I'd sit there with my coffee while she dried her hair, texted her cloud girls, and left trails of herself behind for me to sweep up. But today was different. I watched her, not in that romantic, husband watching his wife way. I watched her like I was studying a stranger I'd agreed to house sit for. Every gesture felt borrowed. Every smile looked like it belonged to someone else. And the scariest part? She was so convincing. She made eggs. 2 plates. Toasted the sourdough we bought last weekend. Asked me if I wanted almond butter. Almond butter. The same brand I'd pointed out 2 days ago in a sad attempt to bond with her over grocery shopping. I took the toast and said thanks, and for a brief moment, I felt like we were playing house again. Like nothing had shattered. She sat across from me, scrolling her phone, laughing quietly, probably at the same chat where I was a walking punchline. "You didn't sleep again, did you?" she asked between bites. I shook my head. "Not really. You've been doing that a lot lately," she said, eyes still on the screen. I waited. I waited for her to ask why, to look up, to touch my hand, to do something remotely human. But no, she was already opening TikTok. I don't know what broke in me at that moment. Maybe it was the hollowness in her voice. Maybe it was the complete absence of guilt. Maybe it was the way she didn't even pretend to be sorry. So I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Do you ever think about who we used to be?" I asked. She paused, just slightly. "What do you mean? Like, who we were when this all started? Do you remember that version of us?" She gave me a look, part confusion, part annoyance. "Is this one of your morning monologues again?" There it was. The jab. Always so subtle. Always so effective. I nodded. "Yeah, I guess it is." She smiled thinly. "Elliot, not everything has to be a movie scene, okay? Sometimes people just grow apart. It's not some mystery you have to solve." And just like that, she gave herself away. Because I never said anything about growing apart. I hadn't brought up the word distance or disconnect. I asked about who we were, and she answered like someone already drafting a breakup speech. She stood up, dumped her plate in the sink, and started getting ready for work again. I sat there, toast untouched, heart pounding. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't ready for confrontation. I wasn't brave enough for truth. Not yet. But I knew I couldn't let this go on much longer. Not because it hurt, but because it was starting not to. And that scared me more than anything. At 10:24 a.m., she left. Said she might get drinks after work. I nodded. Watched her walk out the door again like she hadn't just erased me in real time. The second she was gone, I went to the laundry basket. I pulled out the phone. I opened the messages again, and this time, I scrolled way back. Months. Maybe a year. And I found something. A photo. A mirror selfie. In our bedroom. But taken while I was away on a trip to visit my sister in Oregon last March. She was wearing something I'd never seen before. Lingerie, red, expensive. And in the reflection of the mirror, just barely visible, was a hand. A man's hand. Holding the edge of our dresser. I zoomed in. My stomach turned. He was wearing my watch. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone across the room. I didn't break anything. I just stood there, holding it, staring at that image until the glow of the screen burned into my retinas. The photo was time-stamped March 16th, the day after I left for Oregon. I remember it so clearly because I called her that night from the motel, half-drunk off cheap whiskey, telling her I missed her, and she said she was just watching a movie. Alone. Said she felt sick and didn't want to talk long. Told me to get some sleep, babe. And while I was lying under a crusty blanket in a room that smelled like chlorine and mildew, she was here, in our bed, with someone else, wearing my watch. That detail, that single, tiny, humiliating detail, kept echoing in my head louder than anything else. I remembered losing that watch. I tore the apartment apart for it. I was convinced I'd left it at the gym or dropped it in an Uber. She even helped me look. Suggested it probably fell behind the dresser, and said I was too forgetful these days. And now I realize, it never went missing. She gave it to him. Not just access to our home. To me, but something so stupidly personal. A thing I wore every day. A birthday gift from my dad. A part of me. And he wore it. While he was in my home. In my bed. With my wife. I started shaking. Not from rage. From something colder. Something emptier. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Our bed. And held the phone like it was toxic. Everything suddenly looked foreign. The sheets. The framed photos. The rug she insisted we buy from that overpriced minimalist store. It all felt like set dressing in someone else's play. I thought about confronting her right then. About sending the photo back to her with the words, I hope it fit him better than it fit me. I thought about packing a bag. Leaving. Burning the whole thing down metaphorically, or maybe literally. But I didn't. I put the phone back. Exactly where I found it. Because I needed more. Not revenge. Not evidence. Understanding. I needed to know why. Why she stayed. Why she smiled at me over breakfast and folded my laundry and let me talk about stupid podcasts like we were still something. Why she lied so easily. And why she picked him over a man who would have cut off his own arm if she said she needed an extra blanket at night. I know what you're thinking. I'm weak. Pathetic. Maybe I am. But I loved her. I still love her, and I hate myself for it. Around noon, I got dressed and walked down the block. Not to clear my head. That wasn't possible anymore. But to get out of the apartment before I started pulling up floorboards looking for more pieces of the story. I ended up at the cafe where we used to go every Sunday morning. Back when she still laughed at my jokes and held my hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I sat down in the back corner, opened my laptop, and pulled up her iCloud. Yes, I know the password. She never changed it. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I needed to see everything. Photos, notes, calendar entries, voice memos. And what I found wasn't what I expected. A folder, hidden in her notes app, titled, Echoes. I clicked it open. It wasn't about Zane. Or me. It was something else entirely. A list. Of men. Names. Places. Dates. Short blurbs next to each. Sometimes just one line. Devin. Cried during. Never texted again. Mark. Lied about having a girlfriend. Stupid liar. Tommy. Felt like being underwater. Don't repeat. Zane. Best mix of danger and predictability. Keep casual. And then, at the very bottom. Elliot. Patient, loyal, soft. Sometimes I want to believe I could love him forever. But I know I'll ruin him. I read it over and over again. Like maybe the words would change. Like maybe she wrote that years ago. But the date was just 3 weeks old. She knew. She knew she was breaking me. And she did it anyway. Worse. She wrote about it like it was an experiment. I don't remember walking home. I know I left the cafe eventually because the barista asked if I was okay, and I said something stupid like, yes, I'm just checking emails, even though my screen showed her notes folder in full view. I know I left a tip that didn't make sense, like $11, 78 or something random, because I wanted to seem normal, even though I was crumbling from the inside out. The truth is, I floated through the streets like a ghost, like my own body had decided I wasn't in charge anymore. When I got back to the apartment, I didn't go inside right away. I stood in the stairwell, just below the 4th step, and listened. June wasn't home yet. The silence was a relief, but also, somehow, disappointing. I wanted her there. I wanted to see how she'd act now that I knew. Would she still smile? Would she still ask about my day? Or would she sense something in me had curdled and turned to rot? Eventually, I went in. I dropped my keys gently. I sat on the couch and stared at the television for over an hour without turning it on. I just stared at my own reflection in the blank screen. And I swear, the man I saw wasn't me. He looked older. More still. Like a wax figure of someone who used to care. Around 6:40 p.m., the door opened. June walked in holding groceries. She looked flushed, not from rushing, but from laughing. Her cheeks were red, her phone still in her hand, eyes glowing from whatever joke she was mid-texting. When she saw me, she paused. Just for a moment. But it was enough to notice. "You're home early," she said. I didn't respond. She set the bags down, took off her coat, and walked into the kitchen. I listened to the sound of the fridge opening, the clink of a bottle, the rustle of paper. Then, silence. And then, her voice, just a little quieter than usual. "Elliot, are you okay?" I turned to her slowly. She was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, but not defensive. Cautious. She was scanning me like a scientist watching an animal that might behave unpredictably. "I was just thinking," I said. She waited. "About what?" I smiled. Not with my mouth, with something colder. About how some people collect spoons. Or keychains. Or magnets from every city they visit. She blinked. "Okay." "And you," I said softly, "collect men." The blood drained from her face instantly. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She wasn't ready. Not for that line. Not for me to know. I stood up slowly and walked toward her. Not to threaten. Not to hurt. Just to be closer when I said what I needed to say. "I read everything. The messages. The notes. The one where you called me soft. The one where you said you'd ruin me." She took a step back. "You went through my phone?" I laughed. Not out of amusement, but because of how small her response was. "That's what you're worried about? That I violated your privacy while you were violating our entire life?" She turned cold immediately. That familiar June flicker. The one that always appeared when she felt cornered. "You're being dramatic. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "I know about Zane. About the messages. About how you've been emotionally ghosting me in real life. You wrote that, June. Word for word." Silence. Then she spoke, carefully. "Fine. You know. So what now? You want a divorce? You want to cry it out? You want me to beg?" I tilted my head. "No. I want to watch." She frowned. "Watch what?" I leaned in just slightly. "I want to see how far you'll take it. Now that you know I know. I want to see if you'll keep pretending, or if you'll finally drop the act. I want to see how much of a stranger you can become right in front of me. Go ahead. Keep texting Zane. Go meet your friends. Keep wearing my clothes while you talk about how boring I am. But just remember one thing." I paused. She waited, not blinking. "I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. I want front row seats to your unraveling. Because I'm done guessing who you are. I want to see it." She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. And maybe I was. Because I wasn't the man she knew anymore. Something had shifted. Not in her. In me. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. Not because of screaming fights or late-night confrontations. There weren't any. Not because she left, or I left, or the walls collapsed under the weight of what we both knew. They didn't. No, what made it strange was the quiet. The eerie, almost surgical silence of two people who knew they were living in the ruins of a love that no longer existed, but still turned off the lights at night, like everything was fine. She kept pretending. Maybe because it was easier. Or maybe because she truly believed I wouldn't leave, that I was still the soft boy she cataloged in her notes, waiting to be folded and filed away like a receipt from a restaurant she no longer remembered. But I was watching now. And more importantly, I was listening. Not to her, but to myself. For the first time in years, I noticed how often I said sorry when I hadn't done anything wrong. How often I gave her the bigger piece of cake, even when I was hungry. How I stayed quiet when she interrupted me. How I smiled when she forgot things that mattered to me. How I shrank, and shrank, and shrunk, until I barely existed inside my own life. I didn't say anything. I didn't accuse or blame, or break her phone like some explosive grand finale. I just stopped playing. I stopped laughing when she mocked people. Stopped jumping to help when she left things undone. Stopped checking her eyes for signs of warmth. Stopped apologizing for being me. And you know what happened? She noticed. One morning, she looked up from her phone at breakfast. The same seat, same mug, same scene. And said, "You've been different." I shrugged. Maybe I finally realized I deserved better than this. She froze. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she did. For the first time in a long time, I think she saw me not as a placeholder, or a safety net, or the man who made her feel superior, but as someone who could actually leave. 2 days later, she packed a bag. No tears. No drama. Just a quiet goodbye and a note on the counter that said, "You were right. I didn't know who I was. I'm sorry I made that your problem. I hope you find someone who sees you the way you always saw me." And then she was gone. I stood in the living room for a long time afterward, not crying, not smiling, just breathing. And in that breath, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't need fireworks or closure. The kind that comes from finally telling the truth to yourself. It's been 8 months now. I got a new place. A smaller one. Warmer. Filled with light. I started volunteering at a local shelter, which was something I always wanted to do, but never felt manly enough for in her eyes. I reconnected with my sister, with a few old friends. I picked up photography again. I even started dating, slowly, carefully. Not to replace anyone, just to rediscover what it feels like to be wanted without earning it like a reward. Some nights I still think about her. Not in anger, not even with sadness. Just a quiet echo of someone I once thought would be forever. But then I remind myself, some people are not meant to stay. Some people are lessons in what not to settle for. And me? I'm no longer soft. Not in the way she meant it. I'm softer in the right places and stronger in the ones that matter. And that, right there, that's my happy ending.